Today's scripture passage comes from Luke's Gospel, the 7th chapter, and we find that Christ is on his way through Nain and runs into a funeral procession, and a young man has died, and his mother is mourning him, and he says to them, "Do not weep," and then raises the boy from the dead, which is kind of a contrast from John's Gospel when Christ raises Lazarus from the dead, and he does not tell them not to weep, but weeps with them, and then raises Lazarus from the dead. And it's in John's Gospel. But today we hear something a bit different, where he again has this pity on this woman and returns her son to him so that she might be able to live an upstanding life. But what does that have to do with us today? Clearly, we have the understanding of God's incredible miracles of raising those from the dead. Could be an inkling of our understanding of the raising of ourselves in future times, the raising of the body along with the spirit. But what else does this have to do with us today? Well, unfortunately, many of us, our hearts are beating, but we're dead to life. Our hearts are beating, but our spirits are dead. Our hearts are beating, but for what purpose? What are we accomplishing that God calls us to do? All too often I work with people who are physically alive but spiritually dead, who's given their lives over to greed or anger or jealousy, or even drugs or pornography or gambling, those kinds of things that destroy us. I think our story today is to recognize that we must bring ourselves, bring our children, bring our spouses, bring everyone to Christ. And when doing that, we can have them restored in many different ways, and often bring ourselves to Christ so that we too can be restored. I have never spoken to you about confession, about reconciliation, but I am today. Years ago, after I had gotten out of the service during the Vietnam War, I didn't go to confession for about 15 years. And there was a burden on me that was so heavy. I didn't think that I could ever be forgiven. In fact, I once believed that how could God forgive me when I couldn't forgive myself? One of my brothers said to me, "Art, you don't have the right not to forgive yourself. Christ already died for you." So I began to ponder that the burden that I was carrying was because I decided I was going to carry it. I had so much pride and so much ego that the burden I carried was for me, in a strange way, this indication of my manhood. What a fool. The true indication of my manhood was to recognize I needed help. And so I went, and I went to confession. I said to the priest, "Father, you're going to have to pack your lunch because I have a lot to say." The priest looked at me and said, "You know, your penances, you've been carrying that all these years. Now put it down." I know that receiving our sacraments are part of our daily obligations. Maybe not daily, but periodic obligations. But there's something greater than that sacramental obligation, and that is the relief that you feel, the unburdening of weights that allows you to breathe. The ultimate reward, the ultimate benefit of reconciliation is not only to be reconciled with Christ and the church, but to be reconciled with yourself. When the idea of finally forgiving yourself dawns on you, and a true man or woman in strength always recognizes their weaknesses. After all, Jesus Christ needed help with his cross. Simon the Cyrenian. Who are you not to need help? And ask the Lord, what are we going to do today